everybody, and welcome to the WinUI Community Call. My name is Gabby, and I'll be your host today. Awesome. So the WinUI Community Call takes place on the third Wednesday of every month at 1600 UTC, which is 9 a.m. Pacific right now. Our next call is going to be on June 15th. If you want to reach out to us and see all of the latest happenings, check out our GitHub and our Twitter. So here we have a little bit of a description about WinUI. This is for those new to the call. It gives a quick overview of WinUI 2, 3, and Windows App SDK. If you want the full info, check out the recording after the call. So our agenda today, we're going to be giving a little inside look into Windows App SDK 1.1, say what's coming up, as well as show some demos around self-contained app deployment and app notifications, and give a little inside look into Mica and background Acrylic, which was introduced in Windows App SDK 1.1 Preview 3. And then as always, we'll have time for Q&A, so please drop those questions in the chat for any of the topics we're presenting. Awesome. So first, I presented last month as well this kind of timeline, our road to Windows App SDK 1.1. That was from 1.0, describing a few of our servicing releases where we've been fixing some of your bugs that you've been filing. Thank you so much for that. And we've also started releasing a few previews, slowly rolling out more and more features for you to test out. So coming really, really soon, wink, wink, is Windows App SDK 1.1. So I've noted a few of the features here, including multiple windows, improved default and custom title bar, apps that can run with elevated permissions, and several more. You can also check out our roadmap on our Winap SDK GitHub if you want a description of that. So what else is coming soon is Build 2022. So that's next week, May 24th through 26th. And we, along with several other great live sessions, focus groups, all of that, will be presenting. So at this exact same time next Wednesday, Miguel and I will be hosting a Learn Live session where we'll be walking through creating a WinUI 3 project in Visual Studio from scratch. This is most useful for those who are familiar with C# but new to building WinUI 3 applications. Those who have already been transitioning their apps, this might not be as relevant for you. But those new to the call and new to WinUI, hello, please join us next week. Awesome. So our first kind of demo spotlight is with Greg and Karen, who will be talking about the WinUI 3 gallery, which has been recently updated with a lot of the new 1.1 Windows App SDK 1.1 features. So Greg and Karen, let's see ya.
Hello. Yes, super excited to share the new WinUI 3 gallery update. Can you guys see my screen, or should I introduce myself first?
Awesome.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So a quick intro. I'm Karen. I'm a developer on the WinUI team, and Greg and I, as well as others, have been working on updating the WinUI 3 gallery. And yeah, it's one of the biggest updates or refreshes since forever. So yeah, so let's go through it. So as you can see, the visuals are all refreshed, and new samples are added. So not only does it showcase important samples and stuff like that, it also showcases all the good design styles and guidance as a really good first landing spot for new and existing experienced developers for WinUI 3. So as you can see, there's useful links and also more at the bottom. And let's hop into a new sample. So one of them would be the new title bar. So this is the custom title bar, and then you can reset to the system one, and then go into that. And then you could see the source code for here. So yeah, please go take a look at it. And there's also the new Mica and Acrylic thing that I won't be going into for now because someone will go into detail later. So it's an ongoing update. So I love to hear feedback on what you guys would find useful and helpful in the WinUI 3 gallery. So yeah, it'll be a more useful resource for everyone.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Karen. So if we could switch to the slides. I have a few additional changes that I want to highlight as well with this update. Awesome. Thank you very much. So yeah, we did a lot with this update, and a few of the changes that we made are on the screen. So you can see that we also made some structural changes with the repo. So before the update, we used to have a master branch that hosted the code for the WinUI 2 gallery. And then we had a separate WinUI 3 branch. And then with the update, we decided to change all that and to swap the 2 branches. So now the WinUI 3 branch is renamed to main. And so that's the main branch of the GitHub repo now. And then we have a separate WinUI 2 branch for the WinUI 2 gallery. And so a second change that I also want to highlight is the name change that occurred during this update. So a lot of you might remember that those apps used to be called differently. Before the update, they used to be called the XAML controls gallery for the WinUI 2 gallery. And so we renamed it to that. And the WinUI 3 controls gallery, which was the previous name, was also renamed to the WinUI 3 gallery. So we hope that you enjoy this change. We try to make it simpler and also more consistent. And so, yes, we hope that this change is going to be appreciated by the community. One last thought about the repo change. If you have any local copies of this repo, we've listed instructions on the discussions page of the GitHub repo in order for you to see how you can prevent having any merge conflicts. So feel free to check those out. And yeah, just in general, we're super excited about this update. We really appreciate all the positive feedback that we saw in the past 24 hours. And so yeah, feel free to check it out in the store by just typing WinUI 3 gallery. And if you have any suggestions on how we can further improve those apps, or if you found any bugs, please let us know on GitHub. As Karen mentioned, you can find us on GitHub by going to this repo. So it's Microsoft-WinUI gallery. Cool. Now I'll pass it over to Mike.
Thanks, Greg. Hi, I'm Mike Batista. I'm a product manager on the developer platform team, and I'm going to be going over some demos with self-contained deployment. So I'm going to actually turn off my camera now just to make sure you can hear me clearly, because I was having some audio issues before, but I'm going to share my screen and start the demo. So self-contained deployment, you might have heard of this concept from .NET. So self-contained deployment is all about carrying your dependencies inside your application. And I want to showcase a couple updates to our documentation for the Windows App SDK. This is self-contained deployment is new for the 1.1 release. We initially had a preview in 1.1, and this overhaul, the documentation came with it. So mods, if you can put these links in the chat so that everybody can look at these at their own pace. But I'm just going to go over quickly kind of the pros and cons of framework-dependent deployment versus self-contained. So with framework-dependent deployment, you're a better citizen on the device because you share the framework with other apps that use the Windows App SDK. So your disk footprint is lower, your impact on the working set of the machine is lower. The other benefit of framework-dependent deployment is that it's serviceable. We can service the framework package behind the scenes. But sometimes framework-dependent deployment, it can add some complexity for, if you're used to Xcopy deploying your applications, framework-dependent deployment maybe is not for you. So with self-contained deployment, you can actually carry all the dependencies you have in your application as part of your build output and Xcopy deploy. Just copy the files to the machine and run the executable. So the caveat there is, you simplify your deployment model, and you control the versioning, so you're more resistant to any type of breaking changes. But you're responsible for servicing, issuing updates to your application. If there's an update to the Windows App SDK, because you carry the dependencies inside your application, you're responsible for servicing your application when new updates are issued. So there's a little more details there on this article. You could read it at your own pace, but that's kind of the high-level pros and cons of framework-dependent deployment versus self-contained. So once you decide you want to use self-contained deployment, we have this article links you to the self-contained deployment guide, which is over here, which I'll demo in a minute. But this talks about all the things you can do or the changes you can make to your project to configure it for self-contained deployment. Out of the box, framework-dependent deployment is the default, but you can set a property to change it to self-contained. So the property, which I'll show in a minute, is this Windows App SDK self-contained property. You can add it to your project file, and this works for .NET apps and C++ apps. And this will effectively switch your application to self-contained deployment. So again, some more details here, which I'll probably touch on in the demo, and you should have the links now, so you can read through this at your own pace. So now I'm going to demo this. I'm going to switch over to, I'm going to create a new project, and I'm going to use Template Studio, which is a Visual Studio extension that we've recently updated for WinUI. I think I saw Matt Lacey in the chat. Matt Lacey's been contributing a lot to that project, so shout out to Matt Lacey. So we have an 800, so we're trying to align with the 1.1 release of the Windows App SDK. So self-contained deployment is a feature, and we want to promote that in this wizard here. So you can see self-contained deployment is an option. So I can just select this option, and it will make the changes in the project based on what I showed in the documentation. It will set the right properties in your project file. Now for this demo, I'm going to demo Xcopy deployment, which I know a lot of people that care about self-contained deployment, they want to Xcopy their applications. So for this demo, I'm going to turn off MSX packaging, but this works just as well for MSX packaging as well. If you're packaging MSX and you're self-contained, you still need to register the MSX package and go through that installation process, but all the Winap SDK dependencies will be carried inside of the MSX package. So I've already created this project on the side, so I'm going to cancel this, but that kind of shows you the workflow in Template Studio for creating a new project and opting in. And you can see here, I've got a C#.NET project, and you can see that the Windows App SDK self-contained property that I showed in the documentation has been set in the project file. And let me just run the application to show what it looks like. You can see based on the options we select in the wizard, we have navigation view, web view control, control.
Hi, Mike.
And this app's running on my dev machine right now, but it's carrying all the dependencies inside the
Hey, Mike,
application.
it looks like we're having a bit of an issue hearing you. It's being pretty choppy. Could you, if there's anything else that you can close out, or just speak a bit slower, and then that will, I think, help the quality a little bit. Thanks, Mike.
Sure, I'll put things as I doing them. So we've got the application. You guys can see the application running. So now I'm going to show you the build up, but how did that property that we changed, how did that affect your build output? So here's the build output for the application. And you can see there's a lot of files in here. It's not just the name of your executable. There's a bunch of files here that WinUI depends on. If I keep scrolling, you can see the community toolkit. Core messaging, now we're starting to see some binaries rewrite core from the Windows App SDK. So these binaries typically are carried in the framework package, but because we set that self-contained property, those binaries are now getting copied to your build output. And if I keep scrolling, you can see UI examples in there. So the self-contained property work, and now that you're carrying the dependencies from the framework package as part of your application. So now I'm going to switch over to clean VM, where I've previously copied this build output to this Windows 11 VM. You can see here in this folder that the output that we just looked at is the same, and there's very little installed on this machine. This is basically a Windows 11 box with no developer tools or .NET or anything. And if I scroll down here to the executable, I can double click on this. And because I'm carrying all my dependencies, I can just Xcopy deploy the build output, double click on the executable, and everything works. So this is the self-contained deployment Xcopy scenario that people have been asking about, and it's now supported in 1.1. So I've been told that you might be interested in some behind the scenes details of how this works. So I will quickly show you this file. It's a little overwhelming, but this all works with MS build targets. So there's a file in the new package that when you set that property in your project, it executes this logic. And there's a bunch of logic in here. I'm not going to pretend like I know everything that's happening, but at a high level, it is, as I mentioned, extracting the binaries from the framework package. You can see there's a target here that's extracting the binaries from the framework package and copying it into the build output. There's some other work that we're doing where we are registering the APIs, the WinRT APIs from the App SDK into your Win32 app manifest. So there's some logic in here to convert the registrations from the framework package, which is happening here, convert those into the app manifest and then merge them in with your application manifest. And there's some logic in here to merge PRI files and things to make sure that you get the same PRI files and any resources of your own application. So this is, I don't want to go too into details on this because it's a little complex, but if you're curious about how it works, or if you want to try adapting this to maybe a different build environment, this is all defined in a file called Microsoft Windows App SDK self-contained targets that you can find inside the NuGet package. So that's the demo. So I will return the show back to Gabby.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. And sorry, folks, for some of the audio issues on that. We're hoping we have some documentation as well, and we can kind of give more context behind the scenes in the GitHub issue afterwards to complete that. Perfect. So next up, we have Duncan. Do you mind showing? We have Duncan, and then do you mind showing the slides as well?
Oh, here we go. Great. There they are. Hi.
So, welcome. So Duncan will be giving us an inside look into Mica and background acrylic in Windows App SDK 1.1.
Great. Hi, everyone. So I'm Duncan. I'm a program manager for composition and rendering. Usually live a little further down in the stack, but it's great to be here. I love the new WinUI 3 app, sample gallery app, and we are going to be talking about the new Mica and background acrylic sample, which is available currently on GitHub. So yes, just first we'll talk about what Mica and background acrylic are. So just for those of you who may not be familiar with Mica and acrylic in general, what they are materials that we created just to accent windows with a kind of a semi-transparent glass effect on different system and app surfaces. So acrylic was created in Windows 10, and what it does is it actually will sample and blur like what's immediately behind the acrylic pane. So for example, like a start menu, or you might have seen some apps with acrylic in it and you can see what's blurred behind it. So you're probably familiar with that already. But the only downside of acrylic is that it can be kind of expensive depending on what's actually being blurred, what's behind the pane. So in Windows 11, we introduced Mica, which is a sibling material, and it's designed to use less battery and CPU power because it samples from the desktop background and it only samples and blurs one time. So Mica is what's called a system backdrop material, which is basically like a system backdrop is content that's always drawn at the very back of its hosting element. So like the XAML window, Win32HWind, or an app window today. So we're hoping to expand more materials in the future, but for right now, acrylic and Mica are kind of the main two. And so they are, again, system backdrop materials. And so we, along with Mica, we introduced background acrylic, which is also basically what will allow you to apply acrylic as a system backdrop. So as I mentioned before, right now you can get Mica or background acrylic for your WinUI 3 app currently in the WinUI gallery. And that will be available in the store app as well with WinUI 1.1 or Winap SDK 1.1, sorry. So now what I'll do is just go through a couple questions we have actually gotten from the community. So a few people have observed currently the sample code to use Mica and background acrylic is a little bit complex. And the reason for that is actually because we built Mica from the ground up for Windows 11. And as I mentioned earlier, I actually live at the platform layer usually, which is a layer below the WinUI layer. And so that tends to have basically more complicated building blocks that usually get abstracted as you go up the stack. So at the moment, the higher layers are still in progress, but this is something we would like to do for Winap SDK 1.2. So we do want to make it easier for you. Don't worry. We're going to have basically an easier to use wrapper for WinUI 3 coming down the pike. And those are designed to be used, above the composition layer APIs. So another question we have gotten is why are these only available Windows 11 and above? So as I mentioned earlier, acrylic was introduced in Windows 10. But for background acrylic and Mica, those are only available on Windows 11. And this is a question that came up because the Winap SDK is basically normally targeted for down-level versions of Windows 10 as well, in addition to the current versions of Windows. However, these particular samples are only available on Windows 11, and that is because the concept of a system backdrop was introduced in Windows 11. So basically, that's the kind of the short answer, is the fundamental system building blocks that they require under the hood just don't exist on Windows 10. So unfortunately, we can't go further down level with these particular APIs. And one thing I do want to just highlight as well is that I mentioned a couple times the different layers in the graphics composition stack. So the composition layer, or basically windows.ui.composition, is the bottommost platform graphics layer in user mode. So it's like above all the nitty-gritty kernel graphics and drivers, but it is below the UI frameworks and the shell application layers, which are above it. And so what we do is provide like the building blocks. And so essentially, why should you care about this if you're using WinUI 3? Well, currently, as I said, we'll have the easier to use wrapper for WinUI 3 in Winap SDK 1.2. But for the moment, familiarity with the composition layer or with using some windows.ui.composition concepts can help you get into using Mica a little earlier. Great, and that's all I have. I think we're back to Gabby or onto Danielle.
Awesome.
Daniela.
Awesome. Thank you, Duncan. And thanks for answering some of those questions. And then folks, feel free to leave more questions in the chat. We'll see if we can answer those today, or if we need to pull in some more folks and answer them on GitHub a little bit later. Awesome. Thanks, Duncan. So now I will introduce Daniel, who will be spotlighting and demoing app notifications, which is another new feature that we've brought to Winap SDK 1.1.
Thank you, Gabby. Hi, folks. This is Daniel. I'm a software engineer at Windows App SDK, and I've been contributing to bring app notifications there. And this is the time for a demo. First of all, I'm going to share my screen. And what you're seeing right now here is the code of a WinUI unpackaged app written in C++. I want to highlight how developers can send app notifications using Windows App SDK APIs in the context of WinUI. So during app launch, the very first thing we do is to initialize this construct. This is not a Windows App SDK object, but I introduced this to make the code a little bit cleaner. Now, if we take a closer look into init, developers are expected to register what we know as a foreground handler, which is this. And this will handle what the app is supposed to do once the user has clicked on the notification. And that applies for all notifications activated while the app is running. Also, devs are expected to register their app with the app notification manager. And this tells the notification manager, hey, I want this WinUI app to send notifications. And once this call succeeds, we're ready to go. Now, I have a sample app where we have a couple of scenarios with different notification contents and a button to send a notification. But before sending it, let me share a little bit more of code belonging to this scenario. In this button action, we have this send function, which does a couple of things. The first of all is that here we build a notification payload. That defines the UI contents of the notification. And using this XML, we construct a Windows App SDK notification object, which is what we end up sending here and that is what will be showing to the user. You may have noticed that there are many references in the code to the word toast. Let me tell you that in the past, we have extensively used the word toast to refer to what in Windows App SDK we know as app notifications. And now, having said that, let's go back to the sample and let's click on this button to send a notification. There we go. So I will click on this button. And please notice that the app has processed the notification arguments, detecting the scenario from which I posted the notification and the kind of action taken by the user. This is possible because of one element I defined in the notification payload. So if we go back to the Visual Studio Code, this is a part of the toast schema where we define the arguments passed to the app. And we take the notification arguments in the Foreground Handler. So we go here. And this is the place where we get the notification arguments, and we extract its contents, and we write them in the app window. Now, let's go back to the sample app, and let's move to the second scenario. Here, I'm going to send another notification, which in this case, it has a text box control, which I'm going to use to say, "Hi, WinUI devs." Now let's click on this button. And in this case, the app is not only telling me the scenario from which I posted a notification or the action kind, it's also telling me the input I just typed on the notification. Now I'm going to proceed to send another notification from the same scenario, but this time I'm closing the app. Here I'm going to say, "Launch the app." I click on reply, and in this case, the app gets launched. So in this case, we not only capture the arguments as we did in previous experiments, and the reason of this being working is that if we go to the Visual Studio Code and to the part where the app is being launched, we call the app instance APIs, also part of Windows App SDK, and then we check if the activation kind is app notification, which in this case it is. And later we process the notification arguments, similarly as we did when the app was running. That's all I have in this demo, but I also want to briefly touch into other features that developers may be interested to be using. So please, can you show the slides? Great. So first of all, one of the things that we also offer to developers is to use the Progress Data UI. In this case, the app can update the notification contents to tell the user the status of an ongoing task. You can imagine that the app is downloading certain file or component. So you may want to tell the user, "Hey, we just started to download the contents or the file, and we keep filling out the bar until the task is completed." So you can set updates to properly communicate the user what's the status of the ongoing task. And we also provide the functionality to retrieve notifications that are already sitting in the notification sender, as well as the option to clean one or multiple notifications. Imagine that you get a notification saying that you just received an email, but maybe you don't immediately take action on it. If you open the email later, it makes sense for the app to remove the notification since you have already completed the action that motivated to post the notification. That's all I have. Back to you, Gabby.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a great demo. Perfect. So now those were just several of the features that we're including as part of Windows App SDK 1.1, but those are all available now in 1.1 Preview 3 if you want to manually go and check them out. So feel free to do so and then wait for the stable release. So now we're going to transition into our Q&A section so we can get everybody on the screen, and then I'll pass the torch over to Savoy. as many as you can. Perfect. Awesome. Let's see if we can get the grid view. Awesome. Okay, great. Savoy, are you available? If not, then I can get us started.
Gabby, hello.
Okay, I'm going to start us off with the first question, and then we'll hop on Savoy. Oh, I see him loading in. There he is. Hi, Savoy.
Hey, are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Not sure what's happening there, but yeah, let me know if my audio or video drops for any reason. Hey everyone, welcome to the Q&A section. We've got a bunch of questions already in the chat. Ryan, let's start with the popular one here, if you don't mind kicking us off. We have Samuel and several others asking when WinUI 3 background acrylic will be supported in Windows 10.
Got it. Duncan, you can jump in here too if you have any thoughts on this. But basically, as Duncan explained on the call, it's challenging to get it working on Windows 10 because it requires basically hooks in the operating system. So in order for us to get it working in the way that you would expect it to be working, that would require us to basically service the operating system. That's something that we can maybe take a look at, and we've been having some discussion about, but I wouldn't call it a lock that will do that. Dot Morton mentioned in the chat on the YouTube in the YouTube chat that, you know, when we aren't able to make those things work, what we want to do is something that we call polyfilling. What that basically means is you can call the API and you'll get something that's sort of simulated, or at least an approximation of Mica and Acrylic, and that's something that we definitely will want to look at for those features, and then also for any other features that fall into this bucket. So it's a bit of a non-answer there because I don't know the answer as to whether or not we'll be able to get it working. But Duncan, is there anything you would add there?
I mean, that's pretty much the core reason. I'm not as familiar with all of the various, WinUI 3 features, of course. But I do know that, some features are more easily ported to the Winap SDK environment compared to other features. And, there are some basically, especially that rely on deeper plumbing in the system, that when they were created, then essentially we had to, it's a brand new material and brand new concepts that we created for Windows 11. So it's a challenge to get some of that foundational building blocks back to Windows 10, for example. So like Ryan said, polyfill would be what would happen, if your Mica code tried to run on Windows 10, for example. But that is something we're looking into. It's sort of a bigger question that goes beyond just the Mica and background acrylic. So that's why I was sort of happy to let Ryan handle that, because I was like, well, this isn't just for my feature. It impacts a couple other things as well. But I did see in the chat that he said that yes, we are working on investigating that, and also pointing out those few features which might have that limitation currently.
Awesome, thanks. Let's try a bigger question here for Scott. Scott, and let me know if you already answered this on GitHub, but we had Mar51 asking if we could speak about some crash reporting. They said for apps distributed outside of the store, this is pretty different compared to both UWP and WPF/WinForms. It seems hard to catch some exceptions. And then they went into some details that I can share if that helps.
Yes. No, you don't need to go into the details. I'm looking at it right now. Thanks, Mark51. Yeah, this is a known issue, and it is a regression in the developer experience with respect to UWP. the ability to trap XAML parse errors and so on. And as you've noted in those attached issues, it pops all the way up to application start in your C# app, which is not super helpful, super actionable. The only thing I can suggest is, well, first of all, we're aware of the issue and it's in the backlog. We're hoping to get to it soon to recover some of that developer experience and to make it actionable when you're debugging. In the meantime, I would suggest making use of the output tab and looking for evidence of these exceptions as they occur, and then explicitly breaking first chance on those to try to capture them before they rip through the stack and all the way up to application start. That's what we've been doing internally, to just be frank about that, and that's about the best we can do at this point. But as I say, that's certainly something we want to give some attention to.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Let's see what else we have here. We have a question for Mike from Rima, who's asking, with single file self-contained deployment, is it possible to compress the executable size further? Sometimes the size is, sometimes the exe size is a bit huge.
Yeah, can you all hear me now? Is my audio better at this moment? It is? Okay, yeah, apologies for that. That was frustrating for you, frustrating for me earlier. So the app size right now is a little big, so we are looking at IL trimming so that we can trim out the stuff that you don't use. That's not available right now, but we are looking into that over the summer, so we'll see where that goes.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Ryan, let me know if we can talk to this, or maybe Gabby. John is asking if we have an approximate date for the 1.1 stable release we can share.
I can answer that. Build is coming soon.
Perfect hint, Ryan. Let's see. Actually, speaking of build, Kevin Gallahan is asking if there are any sessions we'd recommend that would be of interest to WinUI devs.
Yeah, I'll take that. And then I think transition to maybe Ryan or Mike as well. I mentioned a little bit in the call that Miguel and I will be hosting a create a WinUI 3 app from scratch. I think, Kevin Gallahan, I've seen you in our repo quite a bit. And so this talk is targeted more for folks that are newer to WinUI development, familiar with C#. So it might not be the right talk for you specifically, but I want to see if maybe Ryan, if you know of other like Windows developer talks that are out there, maybe any keynotes to talk about.
I didn't collect up a list. Sorry, Gabby. I'm not going to be helpful there. Yeah. I should have come prepped with that. Sorry.
Awesome. Well, if anyone else has recommendations, feel free to post them in the comments.
Yeah.
Otherwise, let me grab another question here for Mike. Mike, does self-contained work down level?
Yes, it does. Works down level as far as we say Winap SDK runs down level.
Awesome. All right. And speaking of which, while we got you here, can folks publish their app with .NET Publish?
So .NET Publish, the command line interface, is not supported with Winap SDK, but we do support publish profiles, which is what our default project templates use. So setting the self-contained property in the publish profile, like our templates do, enables you when you build your application to carry the .NET binaries. And the demo that I showed you couldn't hear me, but when I was scrolling through the files and file system, you can see that the .NET binaries were carried with the application because the .NET self-contained property was set in the publish profile. So, and I saw a question in the chat about can .NET self-contained? Yes. And again, this is all in documentation, the links that we shared earlier, how to configure your WinApp SDK project to be .NET self-contained, as well as WinApp SDK self-contained.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Ryan, I see we both saw this question asked a few times. Jose is asking for new desktop applications, do we recommend WPF or MAUI? Looks like that's something you'd like to speak to.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to it. It's hard to answer it in the YouTube comments with just a couple hundred characters because it's a pretty nuanced and complicated question. You know, in general, there's no single answer to that question because, you know, having worked in this space for a long time, every company and every developer is in a different situation. I would say for people who are familiar with WPF and don't need to have like the latest and greatest UX, like Win11 style UX, the type of UX you get with what you saw with the WinUI gallery earlier when Karen and Greg were on there. If you've got an app that you want to make that doesn't really highly depend on having like the best possible user experience, and you're familiar with WPF, then go write your next app in WPF. That's perfectly fine. It's a very mature technology. It's got a great control set. It's got tons of examples on Stack Overflow. It's got good documentation. There's lots of reasons why WPF would be really great to write an app on. If you want something that's maybe a little bit more modern, or looks a little bit more Win11 like, then you start to get into some of the newer frameworks that we've been investing in, like Maui and WinUI 3. And I think WinUI 3 should be in the conversation there because it is actually also the technology that even underpins Maui. And really the way to split between WinUI 3 and Maui at this time is if you are trying to make a cross-platform app, or if you think you might take your app cross-platform at some point. So maybe even not now, but maybe you're thinking of going there in the future. Take a look at Maui because it has its sort of DNA in the cross-platform space. Its team is much more, a lot more cross-platform oriented than WinUI 3 is, since WinUI 3 is not cross-platform at all. And it's a good place to go and kick the tires on that technology and maybe build an app in Maui. If you know that you're going to be Windows exclusive and you're going to stay that way with your app, you want to have basically the best Windows app that you can go and build, then WinUI 3 would be the answer there. So that's why the answer is nuanced. I know people want sort of like the one sentence answer. There really is no one sentence answer. Even WinForms is in the conversation too, right? Like WinForms is a very highly productive framework if you don't super care much about having a very great modern UX, but you do need to get that app built in a weekend, or you want to build a tool or something internal or something like that. WinForms is fantastic for that. And you should just totally go and use WinForms. So that's why it's complicated. We have a lot of different tools on the bench for how you can go and make an app. There isn't just one framework for everything.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. I see we have Bob and Miguel on this call here. So we have a question on GitHub from Simon about title bar, who's asking, when can we expect improvements to the title bar in WinUI 3 for scenarios with interactive elements? Specifically, they are calling out the set title bar API and the set drag rectangle API. They say these issues are pretty difficult, and I honestly wouldn't be able to release an app with these features without changes to the visual design.
So this is feedback that we have definitely heard a lot about. In 1.0, we had a very rudimentary version of title bar, and we made some slight improvements in 1.1, but we've heard a lot of feedback in respect to, one, people really don't like the fact that we've got one API that can be used for Windows 11, and then you've got a different set of APIs that can be used for Windows 10. It's also really hard to embed controls. It's really hard to get the flexibility. And developers have to make a lot of decisions now that they would really like to not have, where it just works and it works on all platforms. And so in this summer, we're going to be spending a lot of time working on making the embedded controls, making that seamless so that just works, on simplifying the API. And the chart that is in the documentation right now for what is supported by each of the APIs, we want to get rid of that chart. We want to have it so that developers can just work with the title bar and set the window attributes, set the drag area, and it just works. So we're working a lot on that, and as we get in later in the summer, we'll be able to share more with it, but we've heard the feedback and we are working hard on it.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. We have a question for Daniel here. I think we need to get his video on the stream so that he can answer. But while we do that, Daniel, we have A user here asking regarding notifications, will there be / is there already a mechanism for knowing for showing notifications while an application is not running, e.g., perhaps through some sort of service? Oh, Daniel, we can't hear you yet because I think we have to swap someone off the stream and get you your video on for your audio to come through.
So I think while we troubleshoot that, do you want to move on to another question?
Sure thing. Looks like we'll have Daniel here in a moment. Oh, Bob made room for Daniel. Let's try one more time here. There we go. We have Daniel now. Go for it, Daniel.
Great. So to answer this question, yes. So we already have Windows notification service where you can post notifications to WNS, and then the notifications will be sent to the client. So these are not exactly app notifications, but they are push notifications, which we are also going to release for packaged apps in Windows App SDK 1.1. So I encourage the person who asked for this question to take a look into the APIs. So while the code patterns are similar to what I shown in the demo, you may need to apply a few changes to make the scenario to be working. And also you need to onboard your application with the Azure portal in order to register to be able to send notifications to WNS.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. Ryan, a question for you from Luke Blevins. Is the Winap SDK team currently evaluating longer-term strategy for enhancing Windows apps to follow sustainable software practices? And will this be a priority long-term?
Yeah, your question's awesome, Luke, because it reminds me of it brings me back to a guy who used to be on the WinUI team, and he actually moved to a different team inside of Windows. But his name is Austin Lamb. I don't know if Austin was ever on our calls or not. Austin was super passionate about this, and he used to give me updates about how there's been teams inside of Microsoft forming on trying to do this more holistically across all of our software in Windows. And I believe that those teams are still forming, and there's still sort of like a charter that's being created and a team that's being created to go and tackle this stuff. I don't have a lot of line of sight to it because Austin's doesn't work on WinUI anymore, and so I've like sort of lost that connection to what's happening in that space. But I do think we're going to get to the point eventually, probably longer term, where we really start to take a serious look at how we can change things in the compiler, how we can change things in our technology to be more sustainable and have a lower carbon footprint. It's not something we're really actively looking at right now, but I think we'll go in that direction at some point. It seems like there is momentum inside the company to do stuff like that. So thanks for asking. It put a smile on my face, made me think of Austin.
Can I pile on a little bit?
Yeah.
Does my microphone work? I don't know if this is addressing it or not, but one thing we're really focused on is battery life. And we do some battery drain, and so that contributes to that as well. Like some of the benefits we get, we talked about Mica and Acrylic a bunch of times. Some of the benefit we get by implementing it in the operating system, which was what makes it difficult to take it down to Windows 10, is that we can be a lot more optimal with the battery by doing it in the DWM system process instead of doing that work in the client process.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Ryan, another question for you here, and I'm going to play with our new show question feature since I've got it right here under my cursor. We have Kevin asking, hey, I think that's showing up. Can we share any plans for WinUI 2.0 at this time? Only visibility I see right now are the product board items.
Got it. So the product board items, if I'm understanding the correct product board, are probably WinUI 3 items, not WinUI 2. In terms of like WinUI 2, we are going to be releasing WinUI 2.8 as soon as we can get it ready. We're basically held up a little bit by actually some issues in the web platform in the web platform space. There's some bugs in there that have to get fixed, because the big thing about WinUI 2.8 is going to be WebView 2. That's going to be one of the new and exciting controls that comes there. After WinUI 2.8 is out, we're going to start ramping down on WinUI 2 investment sort of in general. We're trying to, it's pretty costly for us to invest in both WinUI 2 and WinUI 3 at the same time. And, as a result, both of those technologies move, sort of at a snail's pace because we have to do them both. Oh, WASDK 2. Oh, okay. Thanks. Sorry, what was the okay? What was the original question then? Are there any plans for Winap SDK 2.0?
Yeah, it was. Can you share any plans for WinUI 2.0 at this time? Only visibility I see are product board items. And then as we were answering it, Kevin said he meant WinUI or meant WASDK 2.0. So
okay, yeah, Winap SDK 2.0. No plans for that. That's a ways off. Yeah,
awesome.
But we are building plans right now for WinApp SDK 1.2, which will follow our 1.1 release. We haven't yet settled on the exact feature list that'll go into there, although there's a few things that are probably pretty close to a lock. Things like adding media controls, making Mica and Acrylic easier to implement, stuff like that. I think those are pretty much locks. But the full sort of list for 1.2 hasn't been built yet. We're in the process of building it now.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ryan. Let me grab another question for Mike here. Batista, I mean. Can I Xcopy deploy my app now? Is that something that's currently available for customers? Oh, I realized I was showing a question that was not the one I was asking. There we go. Oh, I realize we don't have Mike on screen with us currently. Let's give it a second here to see if we can get Mike on. Hey, sorry, Mike.
Okay, now I'm here. So yeah, you couldn't hear the demo, but Xcopy deploy, if you are unpackaged, so if you turn off MSIX and you enable the self-contained feature, that's effectively the Xcopy scenario where you just have your build output, you have your executable, and you can Xcopy build output and just double-click the exe. And yeah, that's effectively Xcopy deployment with the C++ applications. I think Scott Jones last week or the last session talked about hybrid CRTs. So hybrid CRT, if you're C++, hybrid CRT in conjunction with self-contained enables Xcopy deployment for C++ applications as well.
Awesome. And while we got you here, Mike, I see another one here on your demo. Why a separate property from .NET self-contained?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. I just mentioned C++, so we needed a property that worked not just for .NET, but for C++ as well. And also in early spec reviews for the feature we got some feedback that keeping separate controls, separate levers that could be independently controlled was a requirement. So for instance, if you wanted to be framework dependent on .NET, but you wanted to carry the Windows App SDK dependencies in your application, you can set the different properties however you want.
Fantastic. And I see one last one here. I'll make sure we got it out while we get you here, or while we have you here. Can I build for any CPU and ship from self-contained?
So you cannot. So .NET doesn't let you do that either. So for self-contained, you need to pick an architecture, x86, x64. So that's a requirement from .NET, and Windows App SDK, our property behaves the same way right now. So if you try to do it with any CPU, it'll tell you that's not supported. You need an architecture-specific build, and then it will work just like .NET self-contained works.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I've got a question here for Duncan and Gabby. See, I'll try that show feature again. It's nice when we have it on hand. Is battery life, performance, and readability the reason for recommending Mica instead of Acrylic for app background? What's your thoughts on using Acrylic as an app background?
Yeah, that's actually the main reason. I mean, you pretty much hit on it. Readability, maybe a little more subjective. I mean, that depends on what's behind it, but that was actually the impetus for creating Mica in the first place, was battery life and performance, because Acrylic is very popular. Everyone loves it. I mean, it's this great kind of frosted glass look, and if you have stuff animating behind it, it looks super cool as long as it's not chugging your system. But that was the thing. It's like people wanted to, let's say I want to apply Acrylic to a huge surface or something like that. we even had designers internally who wanted to do that, and app developers, and so we're like, okay, that's great. Got a lot of good feedback, but it's just not feasible on a lot of systems because of power reasons, performance reasons. So that was the main reason why we created Mica in the first place. But also, from a design point of view, there are reasons to use Mica versus acrylic. Mica is a little more subtle. It also helps emphasize like what the active window is, for example, because of course it only shows when your window's in the foreground, and it falls back to a solid color when it's in the background. So generally, Mica is more intended for longer-lived surfaces, such as like some of the main panes in your app, which may always be there, because it samples the desktop background once, so you can drag your window around and it's not causing any kind of performance hit. Whereas let's say you have a YouTube video and you're dragging your acrylic pane over a moving video or something, it's going to like slow your system down, use a lot of battery. So you can use acrylic as an app background. It's just you have to be a little more careful with that. And so that's one reason why we provided those options, is to say like, they're sort of different uses for different scenarios. Like, so acrylic might be good for more transient surfaces. Like if you have a dialog box that pops up, you could have acrylic behind there, or acrylic behind the title bar there, or like a drop-down menu or something like that. Like you can have acrylic on there, and that would look great. That's sort of the general recommendation. And of course, we do have a lot of this guidance on like the design style documentation as well. But it's just off the top of my head, those are some of the reasons. So you can use acrylic as an app background. You just have to be more aware of performance and battery.
Perfect. And we did have a question from, go ahead, Gabby.
I'll just add one last thing, because I remember being involved, is that when designing Mica, I remember talking with designers about it being accessible for different text backgrounds. So, if it's a dark Mica, then white text is for sure going to be accessible and readable on it and meet contrast ratios, and vice versa for light Mica and dark text. So that's another one for being a good background color versus acrylic, which I don't believe was tested for that.
Yeah, that's a great point, because Mica is more static.
Yeah.
So it's more predictable with its behavior with accessibility. That's a great point. Yeah.
Perfect. And we're right at the end of the hour here, so let's end on a question for Duncan. Duncan, I saw one here that said, if and when Win2D gets further development, are there plans to do any integration with the composition layers, such as drawing framework elements on a surface?
I see. You get into your fancy question highlight. Okay, I was just reading it.
Yeah,
so,
let me see if I can pull that up.
So funnily enough, I actually was the PM for Win2D, and I posted the roadmap for it. Yeah, there it is. I posted the roadmap for it on GitHub. Since then, that's actually transferred to a teammate of mine, so I don't have like the absolute latest updates on that. He's not on this call, but we do have plans for working on it, and basically bringing it more in line with the rest, fully brought into the Winap SDK. In terms of specifics about integrating, like drawing a framework element on a surface, I unfortunately don't know the answer to that. However, I can poke the people who would know the answer. So I would recommend that maybe perhaps we can post this question like on the GitHub issue, and we can have some of those guys answer that too.
Fantastic. All right. Well, yeah, we're right at time here. So I want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in and asked all these fabulous questions. I feel like we got through a ton of technical content today. We didn't get to everything, though. And so if you're looking to see your question answered right away, please take it over to our GitHub repos, where we have an issue type for discussions or questions. We also have a thread for Q&A for this call where you can post it, and we'll try to get your questions answered there. Otherwise, we tend to save them for next month's call if we have time for it. So thanks also to everyone who joined us on the call today. There were some really fantastic presentations from Daniel and Greg and Karen and others and Mike. So thanks a ton, team. Thanks to our viewers, and I'll turn it over to Gabby to close out the call.
Yeah, that was perfect. Thanks, Savoy. And yeah, so thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you either next week at Build or we'll see you next month on the 15th. Awesome. Thank you all.